Ladies and gentle friends, it's been some time, but welcome back to the Fantasy Guild. I know we have a lot to talk about, but today is not for that. Today I come bearing a tale from what is known as the Emberlands. Our tale begins in the shadowed hollows of the Blackroot Valley. You see, in the Blackroot Valley there lived a small, humble goblin who went by the name of Rikkit. Rikkit was small even by goblin measure. His skin was a moss green coloured and his eyes burned like tarnished copper. Rikkit was from this village named Grimfen Hollow, which clung to the eastern edge of an ancient forest called the Elderwyld. Some say the Elderwyld forest is older than the kings, older than light, older than the sun itself. They said that every tree that grows in the Elderwyld remembers, and what the woods remember, they do not forgive. But Rikkit the goblin was not like the other goblins. You see, while his kin squabbled over scraps and meagre loot, shining trophies and treasures in their homes, Rikkit dreamed of more. Rikkit had a dream of finding something that the goblins had forgotten. This recurring dream that plagued his sleep, it was always calling from the Elderwyld. Something buried deep within. What that was, well, Rikkit wasn't sure. The dream got hazy and he couldn't quite make out what it was, but where his dream was calling him, he had a faint idea. So one mist-soaked morning, Rikkit gathered a few meagre things, a rusted short sword, a few scraps of bread, an extra rag or two to cover him or dry any of his equipment, and he set out. Just as the sun was rising, he snuck past the sleeping guards of his village, and he took his first step into the blackened roots of the Elderwyld. The forest swallowed him whole. Trees rose like towers, their roots knotted, twisted, their bark black as ash. Strange lights flew and dipped in between the gargantuan trunks that surrounded the small Rikkit. Every now and then he could see strange flickers off in the distance, almost like shapes moving, humanoid, yet not. Hours began to pass, maybe days, maybe even years. Rikkit lost track of everything surrounding him. The only thing made clear was where he was to go. This one particular location buried deep within the Elderwyld. He had no map. He could see no stars to track his path. Yet something deep within him pointed his every step. Until at last, Rikkit stumbled upon something. He came to a clearing, almost as if it was a wound in the forest's heart. And there, in the centre, buried amongst the roots, lay a skeleton. As Rikkit approached the skeleton, it became very clear that this was not the bones of a fellow goblin, or an elf, or man. These bones were large, and Rikkit quickly realised that this was the long decomposed corpse of a hill giant. Its bones stretched wider than any of the roots surrounding it, and across its ribcage lay something that looked like shattered stone, armour long lost to time. But it was something else that caught Rikkit's eye. On one of its large fingers there sat a ring, and atop that ring was the biggest diamond that Rikkit had ever seen, ever dreamed of, ever could imagine. It was nearly the size of his skull. With great effort, he wriggled and pulled and wrestled with this ring until it came loose. As he lifted the ring above his head, almost as big as a crown, he could have swore that he could see a faint burning deep within the cuts of the diamond. Rikkit's eyes gleamed, and as he clambered down the bones, as if it was some form of skeletal ladder, the ring began to shrink. The metal twisted in on itself, and the diamond almost warped in some ethereal way to where it lay in the palm of his hand, seemingly almost a perfect fit for his own finger. But as he wasn't even finished with the movement, he heard the earth groan around him. The ground shook, and all of a sudden there was like the tearing of leaves, the tearing of bark, the tearing of roots. Rikkit looked up and began to stare around him into the darkness, mist swirling round unseen figures until one emerged. He slipped the ring onto his finger, almost as a nervous reaction to the situation unfolding around him. The figure stepped closer, and as the light hit the unseen presence, the ground around him tore and erupted even further. Before him stood a large skeletal figure, not quite as big as the giant, but maybe the size of a man or orc. Suddenly, light blasted into the clearing, and Rikkit looked around him frantically and began to see hands, bones clamber from the dirt, pulling themselves out of their deep slumber. A legion of skeletons all of a sudden surrounded the young goblin, their armour bound in roots and rot, their jaws hung open in silent screams. Rikkit stumbled back, pure fear gripping at his very core. He quickly shoved his hand into his small satchel and pulled out the short sword that he had brought with him. He began to slash wildly in front of him, trying to warn the skeletons to stay back, but still they rose. Still the tide of death approached poor Rikkit. Rikkit ran, unknowing where he was going, clambering over the trees, through the bushes. Small branches whipped at his face, and behind him was the churning tide of skeletal death. He turned and twisted and fought. He managed to block one blow to his left, another sliced the top of his head, but he was able to slash at the bones, turning them to almost a fine dust. One by one, his skeletal pursuers perished, yet more came clambering out of the darkness. Realizing his fate was nearly sealed, he turned and fled once more, diving, dipping, dashing through the Elderwyld until he saw a small hovel carved into one of the ancient oaks. Looking behind him, he was out of sight for just a split second, so he dove in head first, quickly slipping off the ring, and he hid, and he hid some more. He thought that he could hear the creaking of bones around him, but yet he did not dare open his eyes. And eventually, a small beam of light tickled the top of his head. He could feel the warmth stir him from almost a faint sleep. He emerged from the hovel, only to find that he was alone. Rikkit didn't dare put back the ring on his finger, so instead he took out a small piece of cord and tied it around his neck, and he began the long journey home. In the dark of the forest, sometimes he would catch himself almost fumbling with the ring tied around his neck. It pulsed faintly, a whisper of light, an unseen heat, bringing him some small comfort. And after a moment, every now and then, Rikkit could almost swear that he could hear this ring breathe. After a day's journey, the forest remained still. He didn't look back, he didn't dare to, but eventually he returned to the path that he was familiar with, the one where he had entered the forest. And that was the moment he allowed himself to look back. Mist swirled, darkness seemed to fill every crevice, but in the distance he could hear his friends, his family. So the small goblin turned once more, facing homeward, and ran. He settled back into his quiet life in Grimfen Hollow, but people began to say, comment, whisper behind Rikkit's back that when the young goblin turned his back and walked, they swore they could hear the clatter of bones. He didn't dare tell anyone about the ring. Although he kept it around his neck, he would only produce it when he was alone. It was to be his secret. His solo adventure would remain with him until the day he died. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I know, as I said, it has been a long time since we have done something like this. If you enjoyed this, please let me know, or if you're just really keen to see the old Building a Fantasy World Together series come back, let me know down in the comments. If there's any other types of stories about creatures or characters that you would like me to produce for you guys, again, just let me know down below. But this has been the Fantasy Guild, and it's good to be back. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.